right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Celluloid Chat Room. Today's episode is super special because joining me is Jalena Keane-Lee, the director of Standing Above the Clouds. Welcome, Jalena, and congratulations on your beautiful film and its world premiere at Hot Docs.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm really excited you're here. And I'm excited to get into the questions. So the first one I have is that Standing Above the Clouds has a major focus on intergenerational healing, and it tells the story of mothers and daughters uniting to protect Mauna Kea from invasive development. I was wondering what inspired you to tell this story through an intergenerational lens.
That's such a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. Um, I think I was inspired a lot by my own mom and my relationship with my own mom. She's an activist, and I grew up going to protests and going to like testify at different, councils and courtrooms, kind of like you see in the film. And I feel like she did a really beautiful job surrounding me with so many, powerful women and also stories about like women leaders and activists from around the world. And as I kind of got a little bit older and went off to college away from home, I think I realized that that was a kind of rare upbringing and that not everyone has, access to that kind of experience or that kind of information. So it's something that I wanted people to be able to experience kind of on a larger scale. And when my auntie who lives on the Big Island, she sent me this news clip from 2015 from when the protectors were on the front line facing off against police for the first time. And Auntie Pua, who's one of the main people in our film, and her daughter Havane Rios were both in it, and they were just speaking so powerfully. And the way they were standing side by side as mother and daughter, it was so powerful and so moving. And I think it's something that I was really interested in exploring of what it's like, kind of sharing a life's work or life passion with your mom and how it can be, challenging and also so beautiful and meaningful too.
That's amazing. And it was really, really beautiful to watch the solidarity of all these women playing out on screen. I really, really enjoyed that aspect of the film. And I was doing a little bit of background research on the film, and I discovered that it was first released in 2020 as a 15-minute short. Could you tell me more about how it evolved into a feature-length documentary?
Yes. So this is the first feature film for me and for my core creative team. So me, my
Great
two
job.
producers, and editor. Thank you so much. So I think I always knew that I wanted it to be a feature-length project, but it's really hard to make a feature film. This was a 6-year project, 6-year process, and it was a lot of personal, professional, emotional, spiritual growth, all the kinds of growth that happened along the way. So we made a 15-minute version of the film that was released in 2020, actually while the Kia'i or protectors of Mauna Kea were still on the front line protecting the mountain from construction trucks reaching the summit to start construction on the telescope. And we wanted to release something, one, to kind of hone our filmmaking skills, and then also to build trust with the community of like, this is going to be something that does come out and it can make an impact. And also to share kind of what was going on in the movement and the messages of the movement to the broader world as the movement was at a really important a moment and garnering a lot of additional support and solidarity. So yeah, for many reasons we made it, but I think it really helped kind of prove to ourselves and to the people that we're collaborating with that are on camera that we know what we're doing and that this kind of film and this kind of story can have a really profound impact.
That's fantastic. So once people saw the film in 2020, did that kind of grow the trust that you needed to keep going on and turn it into the bigger film? Because it's a very like intimate film, I thought. It's really beautifully done.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I think so. It really did. And I think intimacy is something that and trust, they're things that grow over time. And through time working together, I think, it really did grow. And then I also felt like my filmmaking skills grew too to kind of match along with that. So that intimacy was able to be felt, not only through the kind of conversations that we're having and the kind of topics that people are feeling comfortable, not only talking about, but also showing and experiencing, but also in how I was filming those things. So I was happy with how those developments kind of went hand in hand and um, were parallel. And a big difference between the feature and the short film, as you probably know, is that the short film it stopped in 2019, and the feature film continues into 2020 into kind of what happens as the pandemic comes in, as the protectors leave the front line and return to their homes. And I think it's something that advisors and audience members have told us that it rarely gets to be seen of what happens after the front line ends and when these kind of interpersonal traumas come up to be healed. How do things continue to grow and heal in that phase too?
Yeah, I'm glad that the pandemic offered like an opportunity for you because I'm sure that like as a young filmmaker who's like finally gaining momentum on like a project, like as you said, it's really difficult to create a feature-length documentary. I'm glad that it had some positives because my next question was actually going to be what were kind of some of the challenges that the pandemic posed, like from a filming perspective, but also like the back end perspective of you have to like there's a lot of like economic things that go into producing a film. Like, could you walk me through that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking about that. Um, I would say story-wise, it changed things a lot. Like originally, I thought that the film was going to be a lot more about international travel and the kind of international solidarity of the mountain. And, I think we see 7,000 people show up to the front line to show their solidarity. So originally I thought that the feature was going to be kind of about how does that happen? And that happens through these relationships that are seeded by many of the people in the film through traveling and through joining other people's front lines and kind of interweaving those connections. Um, and then in 2020, it became clear that maybe we weren't going to be doing that much traveling.
Oh no, that's
um,
like the biggest blow that can come to a documentary about travel.
I know, but I think the story that ended up revealing itself was, what it was always meant to be. And I'm really happy with how things turned out and just the opportunity it gave all of us to grow. But kind of on the more like producerial side, it was definitely very, very hard to fundraise for a feature film. I think it is for a lot of people, but especially for, a first time team, all women of color team, like it was definitely difficult, but we're really lucky to have really great advisors and executive producers at Multitude Films who helped us navigate that space a lot. And even though obviously COVID had so many negative impacts and challenges. One thing that actually managed to be a little bit helpful on the kind of financial side was that a lot of these kind of industry forums, like we participated in Dealmaker at Hot Docs.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, and we did like the pitch forum at Tribeca and at Big Sky also. And in non-COVID times, these things happen in person. A lot of times you have to pay your own way to be there. You have to cover like your accommodations, your meals when you are there. But because of the pandemic, they were all remote. So we were able to be in Hawaii and be in production, but then also kind of taking these meetings and having like kind of building our industry relationships. So I think that was one thing that kind of allowed us to um, create the film given the constraints of the time.
Well, I'm glad that you had the chance to do that remotely because I volunteer with Hot Docs as well. And this year I volunteered at Dealmakers. And I remember seeing the chaos of the room and how many people were coming in and out and all the meetings. And I remember thinking, this seems like the most stressful thing ever, especially if you don't live in Toronto and you're traveling like super far. So I'm happy that that worked out for you the way it did. Um, and okay, I have um another question that's a little bit more serious. I don't know, less fun to talk about, but I just thought this was important. It must have, you really take the viewers into like the front line of the land defense in this film, and that must have been kind of dangerous to film at times due to how heavy the police presence was on Mauna Kea. So I was kind of wondering, like, how did you navigate this from a filmmaking like perspective? Like, how did you take measures to kind of keep yourself safe? Um, because unfortunately, like, that's the circumstances that it's not always safe when you're doing stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. We were really lucky that on the mountain there was a lot of trainings that were happening for nonviolent direct action. So we were able to participate in those trainings, and then we also used resources from Field of Vision. They are a documentary organization, and they have some resources too on kind of what to prepare. For kind of frontline situations. And one of our advisors as well, Tracy Rector, who's a really phenomenal powerhouse Indigenous producer, she was at Standing Rock a lot, so she gave us a lot of tips too. Even things like having extra batteries, having like rugged hard drives so you can make sure you have backups that you have to like transfer in the tent sometimes, and a lot of different things like that. It was really just helpful to reach out to people that had been in those situations and had experience, and they helped us to create different safety plans.
Yeah, okay, it's great to hear about that because I mean, a lot of people probably don't realize that activism is so complex and so much organization goes into it and so much training happens. So I'm glad that you had all those resources available because it translated really well into the filmmaking that we got to see what's happening up close because that's important. You don't always get that view. So I really appreciate that. And
Yeah.
another thing, healing is a really major theme throughout this documentary. And something I was kind of curious about is, did you think that like the creation process of the film was kind of an act in healing itself? Like, did you as a filmmaker, or did you find that the subjects and all the people collaborating on the film, um, like got to participate in healing through its creation?
Ooh, yeah, that's such a great question. Um, that was my hope and intention, and the creation of the documentary form, it was created kind of on these like colonial ideas of extraction and, kind of taking the most while giving the least. And so we were really trying to think about how can we reframe that and make it something that feels collaborative and can return agency to the community that's in the film and not be something that's like taking away their agency about over their own story. So we hope that it was a healing experience. I think we have all discussed how, I mean, it's been so many years, like we've all grown so much and learned so much and healed a lot within ourselves in ways that are easy to talk about and maybe will take more years to process as well. But I think it has been a really beautiful experience. And then to get to see it on a big screen reflected back to you is really special too. And I think some of the healing you can see on screen, and a lot of it, happened off screen, happened, between us. But it's been so beautiful, like the sisterhood that has been forged through the love and protection of Mauna Kea. And that's something that I know myself and my other collaborators want to take with us, whether it's, for our next project or also just as we like navigate through life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's really interesting that you brought up how the documentary medium like did originate as like a totally colonial medium, and you have to be thoughtful as a filmmaker that you're not reproducing like the harmful kind of origins of what documentary has been and what it can continue to be. Especially in Canada, there's a pretty terrible history of documentary being used against Indigenous people. So I love to see the form changed in a way that it actually becomes empowering. And your film did a really beautiful job of this. The agency that it gives to the women that are in it and the land defenders is wonderful and powerful. So I really wanted to say that because that's always something that I think is like an amazing part of documentary is when people
Thank
use
you so
art in
much.
an uplifting way. So
Yeah,
it's great.
I was just gonna say too, like, I think a beautiful thing about documentary film or any films really is that you can kind of set up like the rules of the world that you're creating and that you're inviting audiences into. And kind of speaking of like the pitching and that kind of industry side of stuff, we did get a lot of questions throughout the process of creating the film of like, oh, are you going to interview people from the telescope? Like, are you going to interview the police? That was a big thing that would come up pretty consistently. And I think for me, I just really stuck to like, no, that's not what this film is about. Like, that could be a different film. And there's so many films and so many stories that relate to the Mauna, that relate to so many different land defense movements, across the world. And there's space for nuances in all of those stories, but that wasn't the film that I wanted to create. And in the world that I wanted to create, it's not a question of should the telescope be built, or are women capable leaders, or is this, an organized protest? Instead, I hope that it acts as an invitation to feel what it feels like to be, part of a movement, and to love something so deeply that you caretake it and you protect it and you pass that responsibility on to your children and their children and future generations too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And yeah, I am so glad that you did not interview police officers to see what they thought of it. That's not so like we hear enough of that. That's fine. We don't need the media's got that covered. So um yeah, that's interesting. That actually kind of leads to another question that I had as far as media and perspectives, and that's that there's a couple different times in the documentary where we see like the action that's happening through social media. And I was wondering, like, kind of what went behind the decision to include social media into the film, and maybe hear a little bit about like what role that you think social media plays in activism in today's age.
That's such a good question. Yeah, it's something that we talked about a lot in the edit room of like, what is the degree that we want social media to be involved? Because it is a really big part of this movement. And I think it's a really big part of modern day activism. And, for things that are immediate, you can't wait like 6 years or 3 years or 4 years for a documentary to come out. Like sometimes you need people to show up immediately, and you need people to know what's going on immediately. And something that we talked about a lot on the Mauna, there was a whole media collective that was on the Mauna that kind of worked together to put out images and video of what was really going on. And something that Dr. Ilima Long, who's a Hawaiian professor and was one of the people who led the media team, talked about was the need for narrative intervention to go hand in hand with physical intervention. So physical intervention being like, physically saying, construction trucks cannot come up here, and putting your bodies on the line to make sure that they aren't able to go any further. And then narrative intervention, intervening on these dominant press narratives about what's going on and about um, who's worthy of being a leader and all those kind of things. And I think we're seeing that a lot today as well with the student protests happening around the country. And so I think social media can be such a powerful way of intervening on the predominant media narratives in the immediate, and being like, look, like this is happening right now. And a lot of times I think we're seeing too that um, major news outlets maybe aren't going to cover certain things, but they can get a lot of attention through social media and through people sharing them through those kind of platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. And social media can be oftentimes the wake-up call that the bigger media outlets need to be like, okay, we have to focus on more than one perspective in this case. We can't just go with the dominant narrative on everything because that's not the only narrative, and it's oftentimes not the kindest narrative. So, thank you for that. And now I want to say congratulations because Standing Above the Clouds won the Bill Nemton Award for Best Social Impact Documentary, which is so exciting. How
Thank
does it
you.
feel to have your work recognized this way?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's amazing, and it feels a bit surreal still. It happened like maybe just a few days ago, so I think it's still sinking in. But I can't even yet put into words just the feeling of, thinking about something and working on it and holding it like so close to my heart for so long, and then kind of releasing it into the world in this beginning of our festival tour, and having it be so well received, and to receive an award at such a prestigious film festival, it means so much to me and to my entire team and everyone in the film. And we're so grateful for all the people who um, advocated for us and advocated for our film and for the Mauna and for this kind of storytelling and both saw and felt like the impact that it had.
Great. I hope that if you haven't had the chance to celebrate yet, that you do soon and that your whole team gets to take that in because it's so exciting. How does the award, how do you think this will impact kind of the documentary's trajectory going forward? As I'm not sure how like the distribution exactly will work after the festival, but is this gonna kind of give you guys a leg up and make the documentary kind of more like widespread?
We hope so. I guess only time will tell. Our next film festival that we're playing at is Seattle International Film Festival. And then we're playing at some others that have yet to be announced. But we are still actively seeking distribution. And yeah, we're open to any opportunities that are aligned with our values and allow as many people as possible to watch the film.
Good. I hope it reaches, the broad audience that it deserves. Because we need more films like this in the world. We need more people to see them. And I'm glad that it got to have kind of its first preview at Hot Docs, which is an exciting festival. I love Hot Docs. Um, but now I have a question kind of more about you. So you are a director and you're also the co-founder of a production company called Breaktide Productions. I'd really like to hear. I'm sure you have lots going on with that. Do you have any kind of other projects that you have coming up that you're excited about, or is it way too soon to think about that yet?
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that up. So yeah, I'm a co-founder of Breaktide Productions, which is an all woman of color video production company based primarily out of the Bay Area in California. And we have a few different kind of client projects and shoots that are coming up. And one of my co-founders is working on her feature-length documentary, which is called Oak Lead, which is about lead poisoning in Oakland. And she's heading into post-production for that. So we're really excited about that project. And for myself, I think I have some different ideas, but I think I just want to kind of allow myself to feel all of the relief and happiness and, all the different emotions that come with releasing this project. And I think a big, lesson and healing, like we were talking about earlier, of this project was, you know, trying to embrace rest and, do things in a way that are a bit kinder to our bodies and our spirits and just acknowledging that, we're human beings and sometimes we need downtime and rest and time to dream things up. So even though I'm a triple fire sign, so it's a little bit against my nature, I'm trying to embrace that and to just allow myself a period of exploration before jumping into the next long project.
I feel you on that totally. Sometimes I'm like, I want to do everything, but I need to hibernate. Like, there has to be some give and
Yes.
well, that's fantastic. And now my kind of final question, how can people learn more about taking action and standing in solidarity with Mauna Kea?
Thank you so much for asking that. So, Protect Mauna Kea is a really great Instagram account to follow. It's at Protect Mauna Kea. And so is mkea.info. That's MKEA period info. And they both keep really up to date with different things that are coming out about the movement and different calls to action. And right now, there's a change.org petition to stop the building of the telescope, and that's at just about 500,000 signatures. So we're really hoping to get it over that mark. And then there's also a big vote that's coming up from the National Science Foundation actually this month. And they're going to decide if they're going to continue to put their support behind the 30-meter telescope or switch over to the Magellan telescope. And if they did switch over, it would kind of effectively halt the 30-meter telescope. And they're open for public comment right now. So that's a great way to get involved as well.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And I'm glad that your film got to be released before this kind of critical month. So hopefully that will gain some more momentum. Um, yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna end the recording here, but I'm sure all of our listeners really enjoyed this, and I know I did, so thank you so much.
And thank you so much for having me and for all your really thoughtful questions.
Oh, of course. All right.